Thank you. Okay, that definitely made it worth it. Thank you all so much for being here. Such an honor. I've been asking myself this question for a while. Can design help heal loneliness? And what I have found is that the question is really one of connection. And the woman that taught me everything I know about connection is this woman here. She used to say, it's about connection, not perfection, urging us to be brave, to lean into the messiness that is any genuine human relationship or gathering of people. This is my mom, Catherine, and she connected with everyone. We shared a dream or a calling to make the world a more kind, loving, and connected place. And if I'm being honest, her top dream, though, was to be a grandparent. Yeah, because some of you guys can relate. And I was so hopeful that when I became pregnant that she could meet my daughter. But sadly, the world had other plans, and at 4 months pregnant, I lost my precious mother to her 10-year battle with metastatic cancer. I was in mourning. Heck, I am still very much in mourning. And at the time, I was in a new city, and I felt so lonely. And I braced myself for what my doctors and I expected to be severe postpartum depression. And when the time came, her words came flooding back to me. Be brave, lean into connection, at least leave the house. And so I did the only thing I knew how. I would wrap sweet Elena to my chest, and we would head out on our daily walks. We would go to the coffee shops and cafes, and we would smile and wave at the other mothers and babies, and we would coo and giggle at the kind grocers. And I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but for me, I didn't really even need to have that much of a conversation with anyone. I just felt connected in our shared humanity. And that's really how I made it through. My environment, my neighborhood was a huge part of my support system without ever really them being aware of it. I am an architect, and I am a researcher with a background in psychology. But the thing that brought me to architecture is people, all of you guys. And this experience showed me firsthand the importance of social connection, but also the power of the places in our lives to be transformative in our healing journey from loneliness. But as a researcher, I wanted to understand better. And what I found was that I certainly was not alone in my journey with loneliness. In fact, 3 out of 5 working American adults are lonely, with rising numbers feeling left out, misunderstood, or lacking companionship. And that is a lot. And we are all at risk in times of transition or the global impacts of a pandemic. And I think that what we can get wrong sometimes is feeling any sort of shame about that. Loneliness is an innate signal, like hunger or thirst, helping us to lean into the things that we need. And it is only when we ignore those that we can become sick. And for that reason, loneliness is called a global health epidemic. But you might be wondering, is it really that big of a deal? You know, does it really impact our health? And what the research shows us is yes, it is a very big deal. In fact, loneliness and social disconnection have outsized impacts on our health compared to obesity or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, let that sink in. Loneliness changes us at a cellular level, and I mean that quite literally. And by doing that, it increases our risk of dementia, heart disease, stroke, depression, anxiety, and a whole host of chronic health conditions. All right, that is a lot of bad news. But the news that we can use, the fantastic news, is that social connection has the exact opposite impact. Social connection helps to foster health and well-being, physical health, mental health, and can help to extend our life and our healthy years. And that's really what I want to focus on, is connection. And there's a common piece that we oftentimes forget in the conversation around connection, which is our infrastructure, or our built environments, all of the places of our life, from work to home to the streets that we walk on. All of these have been shown to have an impact on our social connection. And we can look at the research that shows greenness, street design, architecture. All of this has the potential to impact our health, our well-being, how often we connect with others, something called social capital that helps us to form relationships that we can later leverage into lots of different opportunities, both economic and otherwise. And there's a special type of third place that was really important to my life and my healing journey called third places. This term was originally coined by the sociologist Ray Oldenburg, thinking about first places as your home, the place where you can be alone and informal, you can sit in your PJs and eat ice cream on the couch. Your second place being your workplace, where you show up and you're public and you have more of a persona. Whether it's your suit or your fancy kicks, you're playing a role. But third places are really unique because they let us let our hair down and break down those barriers, letting us authentically connect with other people. Some we know, some we don't. And just being in their presence helps us to feel less lonely. And what we've found is that third places boost diversity and well-being. They boost the integration of different people, the trust we have in our neighbors. And one of my favorite things about third places is how they serve as an enabling place. And you can probably guess why. They enable us through difficult times, whether we're coming out of rehab, going through a major loss or transition in our lives. And what we've found, what the research shows, is that they tend to match the social support that we're lacking elsewhere. Whether that means that we are living alone or in a home filled with people and yet still don't really feel like we belong. And that is why third places are so magical in my mind. But I think it's important to say it doesn't have to be a cafe. It can be all things from a coffee pot with seating at your office, all the way to a city block that becomes a hub of celebration. I think TEDxDeepEllum is a wonderful place that has lots of different examples of that. But I want to share one of my favorite examples of all times with you guys, which is Bryant Park. If you look really carefully in the background, you can see my old office on the 6th floor. And I used to look down and marvel at the vibrancy of Bryant Park, how it connected people that came from all over the city. But the history of Bryant Park wasn't always so rosy. In the 1930s, it was redesigned using classical principles, bushes as barriers to keep the misfits out from doing harm. But quickly, it became a place of ill repute and a magnet for crime. And businesses fled the area. And it wasn't until 30 years later that the urban sociologist William White was brought in to help them understand what was really happening. And what they said was that, he helped to look at the actual use versus the designed use. And what they found was that the actual use was people feeling scared and like they didn't have access into the place. But the designed use was that, design that I was just speaking of. And so when he recognized that access would be at the hub of the matter, both psychological and physical, he worked with landscape architects, designers, policymakers, and planners to transform the space into what it is today, a hub in the city that brings people from all around. But I wanted to know, what does the research say about places like this? And that brought me here. When you look at this place, what do you feel? For me, if I see this in a movie, I instantly want to go there. And what is it about that? Well, what the research shows is that it's a few different things. there's the component of access. There's both psychological and physical access that White speaks of. We're able to move freely throughout the space, being welcomed in. There's also nature, from the blue sky above to the warm clay bricks below. There's activation in the different cafes and stores and the fountain in the center. And through that, there's lots of different choices and how you want to engage or watch and be a part of the action in that way. There's also human scale, and human scale is one of those sort of hard things to describe, but I think of it in everything from the bricks, the size of the human hands that laid them, all the way to the umbrellas that you see that mark the space to feel safe and protected. And lastly, sense of place. You can see this in lots of different elements, but specifically in the fountain in the middle that was created by artisans centuries prior to tell the history and story of the place. And I like to say that third places have a certain panache or something special. Place, accessibility, nature, activation, choice, and human scale. But don't take my word for it, let's test it together. Okay, I want you guys to look at this picture. Take it in. What do you think that is helping you to foster connection? What would you change? All right, got it? So as you may have guessed, this is what not to do. And the only reason I am picking on this specific Whole Foods is not only because I used to shop there, but also because when researchers studied this space, as well as numerous other places across New York, they found that standing outside here, people were markedly less happy than anywhere else. And a big part of that is about the monolith of glass you see here on the front. And what that does is it increases our stress response, and people speed up to pass this space. And because of that, similar research has shown that people are less likely to return a wallet in places with a similar type of design. They are less likely to help a stranger that is lost. And all of that, it seems so simple and so small, and yet all of that helps to contribute to what it means to live in a connected, trusting world. And guess what? Whole Foods got the memo. Good job, Whole Foods. They don't have to be the only ones. So let's look at another example. This is Maggie's Center. Maggie's Center are these amazing hubs outside of major hospitals, and they serve cancer patients and their families. And I wish so badly I had had one of these when my mom was sick. And what you see is that there is easy access flowing throughout the space. People are welcome at all times, and that there's lots of different choices in the programs and in the spaces within. And while each Maggie's Center is designed differently, they are always designed around this hearth because they understand that breaking bread bonds us to one another. And it's really a beautiful thing to see, but I think it's also important to say that it doesn't have to be a building or even cost a lot of money. What is important is that by using these principles, we can create wonderful places of connection. And you don't have to be an architect to do that. What's important is that if you want and you choose, we design lives of connection. And that is how we can heal ourselves and our communities through loneliness. For me, it was the loneliness of becoming a new mother without my own. For you, maybe you're feeling lonely and you don't really know why. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a major loss of your own. Whatever it is, know that it doesn't have to be this way. We do not have to move through the world feeling like a piece of us is missing. But if you want it to change, you have to, in my mother's words, be brave. You have to send the text, tell the person that you care about them, host a supper club or create a shared space in your community. And through this, through these small acts of repeated bravery, we can create a more kind, loving, and connected world. I hope you'll join me.